Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mic Check
2.
I'm Rachel,
I'm Sean.
and we're still missing Aja, but she's soon to join us. Hopefully, very, very soon. We miss her.
Hi, Asha.
So today, being the month of June, we wanted to go ahead and highlight Pride Month. And I think the conversation should go beyond just the month of June. So let's kind of dive into it and learn a little bit more about Pride.
What are we diving into? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Having an Aja moment. Okay, so I think it's important to know where we are, but we have to always know where we started from. So let's kind of go over a little bit of the history of Pride. So I know a little bit. I'm going to tell you what I know. You tell me.
Okay, tell me what you know first, and then we'll go from there.
So I know it started in 1969.
Look at you. Guess you did some homework.
I did do my homework. And I know that it kind of started with riots, I think. The Stonewall riot.
Stonewall riot.
Okay. And then I believe since then, like marches became a big thing for advocacy for the Pride community. And just the whole basis of it was to get rights and just kind of have your voice heard. And it's just celebrated. And now, many, many moons and years later, we get to celebrate a whole month. But like I said, think it should go beyond a month.
Look at you.
Okay, so what did I miss? Come on, Sean.
She did a whole clip note. All right. No, you pretty much had it right.
Okay.
Stonewall riots, also known as the Stonewall Uprising, began June 28th of 1969 in Lower Manhattan at what was called the Stonewall Inn. Basically, what it was, police officers at the time were arresting people, beating, or just harassing people based off of their sexual orientation. And at the time, at the Stonewall Inn, people got tired, and there became protests that started to pop up at that moment on that day. And from that moment, the protests lasted for days. People were demanding equal rights. People were demanding stop arresting us just based off of our sexual orientation. So that's where the Stonewall riots initially came from. That's also where Pride Month comes, because it's happened in June. And so what ended up happening based off of those riots, a year later, the first Pride parades happened. I believe there was one in LA, there was one in Chicago, San Francisco, and New York. So that's why in the month of June, we always celebrate Pride. That's because that's when the Stonewall riots happened. And then that following year was the first year that they initially started Pride parades and celebrations, just as a form of protest to demand equal rights for people of same-sex orientations or preferences. So that's where it came from.
Okay. Well, lace me on the
You pretty much had it right.
Yeah, so. But you broke it down to make it more sense of like why it's celebrated in June. It's just to highlight the history of it. So it doesn't mean that it's just like, oh, we stop at June, but this is like, we want to make sure that you know your history.
This is why everything's done in June.
I love that. Okay. Because, I mean, I knew 1969, but you brought it full circle for me for the June. So
and like even with we even had our trailblazers, and I will say we call them icons. Icons are basically a figure in the community that's extremely well respected, that has earned their place in history, or in our terms, in gay history. So like we had Marsha P. Johnson, we had Sylvia Rivera, we had Stormé de Lavare. Excuse me if I said the last name wrong. They were some of the first transgender women that came forward in the protest during Stonewall riots. So they would be considered like our icons, our trailblazers, because they were some of the first.
Do you have somebody particular that you consider an icon for yourself?
For myself, I'm a weird one. Because I didn't come out myself until late. Like I always thought about it, but and back then we didn't have social media. Like MySpace was barely becoming a thing, so we didn't. I didn't.
You're telling our age now with MySpace.
I mean, we're still young, but at that time, I wasn't exposed to a lot of stuff like that. Like I went to a Pride parade before when I was younger. I would say for me, That's actually a really tough one for me.
Just to pick one, you think?
Just to pick one, because I really, for myself, I wasn't exposed to the culture as much until I met a group of friends that actually brought me into everything. So I don't have particularly one person. Like, there were, like, I know the first two people that I really looked up to in the community. There was one, his name is LB Woods, or known as Bunny, and there was another gentleman named Adonis. They were two people I really looked up to because they were two of the first people I met in that spectrum, because at the time I wasn't exposed to that.
Right.
Even though I had feelings of it, I knew what was going on, but I was never exposed to it as much. Like, I was, but I wasn't, in a sense.
So I guess it kind of gave you the sense of like, oh, this is okay. Like, other people are experiencing things that I may have experienced.
Yeah, like, even like as a kid, like I said, I went to a pride parade with my parent. But you're young and you don't really fully grasp. Like, you just think, oh, we're going to a parade and there's rainbows everywhere. You're not really grasping that. And this is back in the 90s. So 90s compared to now. So I know kids nowadays, they know what's going on. But back in the 90s, it was like,
they have more access to it. So
they have access to research and media outlets and stuff of that. And stuff like that. I won't say stuff of that nature, so I won't say it. I almost said it, but I'm not.
So, for me, so I think working here, it kind of broadened my education, obviously. And I think you've been a great influence on, like, just, being like, oh, don't be scared to ask no questions, like, because I feel like that's a big thing. I used to always say, girl, don't be. Yeah. But
remember when you first met me, and I'd be like, girl, if you got to ask me a question, just ask it.
I'd be like, hi. Like, look at my eyes, hi, Sean. Yeah, so it's just, I think it's very important that to have people in your corner that can educate you properly on different things, and get you to understand things differently.
Oh, definitely. Because even when I was younger, I didn't understand stuff until, like, I met Bunny and Adonis, and they actually started to educate me on different things. Like, I didn't know stuff.
Right.
And so now here we are, 20 years later. And now I'm educating people on stuff that I know and what I've experienced. Because, even though I'm still from a generation where we didn't have to experience, like, police harassment and things of that level, like,
it's still a lot going on.
It's still a lot going on. Yeah, definitely. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds cheesy, but I really learned a lot from the TV show Pose. Is it Pose?
And a lot of people did. There's nothing wrong with that, because that introduced, like, ballroom culture and not even just, like, gay families. It introduced, like, what that was and, like, how important that was for, like, young gay people who were kicked out of their homes. Like, they had nowhere to
go. And, like, is it, like, mothers?
Mothers.
Yes.
Gay mothers. They would start a house. And so for the people that don't know, there was a thing called houses. So if you ever see Pose, it's on Hulu or FX.
Yeah.
But they had houses, and what these houses did, they basically were like a form of shelter for young LGBT children, whether they were male, female, or transgender. If they were kicked out of their home, they had nowhere to go. A mother could potentially take you in and bring you up. That would be your parent. That would be your gay mother or your gay father. So that's how that came about.
And just kind of help you navigate through life.
Yeah, they help you navigate through life, the ins and outs of the gay world, and what's acceptable, what's not, how to protect yourself, how to safe sex, like
things you should know.
Things you should know.
Yeah.
That you weren't exposed to when you were at your home before you were kicked out. So.
All right. Yeah. So I know you mentioned that our generation, didn't have to go through.
George, I'm not old.
Well, sorry. I had to remember because, Sean's not much older, but we circle the same little range bubble. It's like 21 to 42.
Yeah, we're in that little demographic.
We circle the same bubble. But okay, so I was going to ask, it's still a lot going on. I think it's a lot that still needs to be addressed, and just getting the conversation started about certain things. And I know a big thing going on right now is in Florida. So they recently just passed a lot of laws to kind of, I guess,
I say marginalize, but there were different things in Florida going on that are basically trying to limit, how do I say this?
Like
correctly? Access to the alternative lifestyle. That's the way I'll say it.
Right.
I won't dive too deep into it.
Right.
I don't like to get political on here. But one key thing I would like to stress is just the importance of voting. Voting does make a difference. So I always push that. Make sure you vote. If you don't know what's happening in Florida, make sure you research it. I won't dive too deep into that again.
Right.
But yeah.
And I think it's always important to know what's going on in the world, like what's going on in your state. Like,
definitely.
You know, just you may lean to one side or the other, but it's so important to educate yourself. Yeah. So you just got to kind of know what's going on out there. And I know a big thing right now is gender identity.
Yes.
So I know it started off in the Stonewall riots for the LGBT, and now we're at
LGBTQIA plus, and then there's.
Okay, so for those who don't know, let's break them down.
All right.
So I know G is gay, L is
bi.
Lesbian.
You're lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer or questioning. It's one or the other.
Okay.
Intersex, asexual, or agender.
Okay. I like how it includes. It's not like
the A can also be referred to as an ally.
Okay.
So for those that don't know, so an ally is basically someone that's not necessarily lesbian or gay or transgender, but they are an ally and they do support and advocate for LGBTQIA rights.
Okay. So. Nice. Okay. So question.
Answered.
Yes. Pronouns, they're huge right now. Everybody is, even I see it's getting more inclusive. Like even like on Indeed recently, I updated and it was like, oh, what are your pronouns? I love that. So people,
even on Instagram, I noticed that
it's on Instagram.
It's on Instagram now. So now you have pronouns. I was like, oh, and even in school, kids are asking, like, are learning about pronouns, and they're like. I think there was a story, I forgot who told me that, but it was a couple of weeks ago. A friend of mine has a daughter, and when they were in school, and she's like, I'm not a she, I'm they.
Right.
And so it shook the table because they were like, wait, what?
What's going on? Yeah.
You have a 7-year-old saying they're they, but it's not a bad thing. But
so my question is, one, how do you ask? And it kind of like a little shame comes with it too, like if you get it incorrect. You know what I'm saying? Like if you just automatically like assume, and I feel like sometimes it's like you're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like how would you advise somebody to handle that?
I wouldn't say necessarily shame because I always say there's no such thing as a stupid question. There's no harm in asking, but I would say when you ask, it's all about the tone and approach. So and so you wouldn't want to be ignorant, like, oh, so what do you refer as?
Right.
But it's just like, hey,
just like, what's your pronouns?
What do you like? Do you consider yourself? Are you she, he, they? And people will tell you like I'm he, him. Some people, ladies will say her, she. Even transgender, you have to be mindful.
Right.
Her, she, or if it's a trans man, he, him. And then of course you have non-binary and people that don't necessarily want to be referred to as just one gender. It's just in the approach. I don't necessarily think there's a bad way to do it as long as you don't come across ignorant or rude. Right.
I guess what I'm trying to say too is just like, so we just been accustomed to one subject, like he, she. And so like now we're adding, which is great, but you know, I think sometimes we forget like, oh my gosh, like I forgot to ask and things like that. So I think it's a really good point to just not be ignorant about like how you ask.
Yeah.
Just I mean, even like, you know, you don't have to have a tone like, you know, just like, hey, what are your pronouns?
Yeah, basically. Because even at work, I mean, some people come and ask me like, hey, how do I refer to him or her and, without being rude? And then, you know, that's when I'll go and look. And like, I'll look at and ask like, hey.
Right.
And most of the times, even if it's a person of our trans community, like I said, you want to be mindful. You don't want to be offensive. And I mean, just miss or miss, and usually most people will correct you. So if you do happen to get the pronoun wrong, it's fine. People usually will correct you, and they'll just say, "Well, I prefer to be known as," and don't take it offensively. It's just that's just what it is.
Yeah, take it as a learning.
It's a learning. It's a learning thing
curve for everyone.
Yeah. So that way, you know, in the future, if you see that same person, maybe a week or two from now, you'd be like, "Oh, well, hey, Mr. or Mrs." And then,
As we mentioned, you know, the main thing here is education, to educate yourself and things like that. So what's something you've learned from a friend? that really stuck with you?
This is gonna sound so crazy, but it's the truth. Safer sex tips.
Okay.
I'm just being honest.
No, okay.
So if y'all ask me a question, I'm gonna be honest.
Yeah.
So that really was it, because at the time I didn't know.
Right.
So like I said, when I met like Adonis or Bunny, like they had groups to educate you on safer sex practices, and so that was something I didn't know. So that's honestly one of the best things I could have learned, because safe sex is important. You want to try to avoid any kind of potential exposures to any kind of STIs, STDs, things like that. So that was my biggest thing for me,
was learning that. So
learning safer sex practices.
It's actually funny that you say that, because in college I was in this group and we did a safe sex education class, and you would be surprised how many people like didn't even know how to put on protection correctly.
Exactly. So I didn't realize there were ways you can contract STIs or STDs like based off of things you did. I didn't know, because like I said, when I was younger I wasn't exposed to a lot of things like of that. So as I came out and I met them and we went to I went to classes and started to learn, I was like, oh, okay, so now I can put this put this into play. Put this into play as you play. But that's another story for another day.
But no, I do think it's important, because even just I think everybody needs to be trained on it, because it's just like you're doing it so wrong, like so wrong. Like I'm gonna tell you, 90% of people are doing it incorrectly.
Yes.
Even with the directions.
Even with your little pamphlet.
But you gotta get like a pamphlet. Like I think it's important for. I know a lot of people are against it, but just education in schools about it. But so. You did mention that you decided to come out later on. So what do you think is the most difficult part about that transition?
For me, it was my mom finding out. That was the hardest part. I know a lot of people can relate. I think the hardest part for someone that wants to come out and can't, it's not necessarily friends, because friends, if they're your true, I always say if they're your true friends, they'll have your background, but it's your parents. And how are they going to react to I call it the talk for me. I call it the talk, because it's that, Mom, Dad, can we sit down? I want to have a talk with you.
Right.
And usually like, oh boy, here we go. They're either going to come out or someone's pregnant.
Right. But I think it's interesting. Not in everybody's case, obviously, but some majority can probably say like their parents are kind of like, oh, baby, we knew.
I won't even say that, because then you also have, every parent is different.
Different, correct.
Every household is different. Every, I don't even know how to say it, but the upbringings are all different. So some people can be accepting. Some parents already know, and they always say like, moms know.
Right.
I've always heard that. I don't ever get it, but I've always heard moms know.
Yeah, moms know.
But at the same time, you still have that fear in the back of your head of like, oh my God, how are they going to react? Is my mom or dad gonna be okay with this? Are they gonna be mad? Because there's bad.
It's not always good. Yeah, it's not always good. I'm just being
realistic. It's not always. Oh, let's hug and it's okay, baby. I already no.
Because if it was like houses and mothers and things wouldn't be in place if it was all
honky dory,
butterflies and rainbows.
Yeah, rainbows, huh?
That was a.
Oh, okay.
Hashtag rainbows.
But there are times you can potentially be kicked out of your home, and that's why a lot of younger people don't like to come out until they're at that age to where they're living on their own. And at that time, even for me, like I was very closeted until I was on my own.
Right. I was going to say that too. I think in our younger growing up years under our parents' households, we're not really exposed to a lot of things.
Right.
Like they kind of shelter. Yeah, they kind of shelter us in different ways. And then like I felt like when I got to college, I was like, oh my. It's a whole world outside of, like, you go to your high school and like when you're a 16, 18-year-old head, like that's like your biggest problem is you know what I'm saying?
It's
and
like
then,
starting puberty is your biggest problem. But then when you go to college, it's like, oh my, and I'm not even just talking about like
college, just
gay, lesbian thing like that. Like just the whole spectrum, like you're exposed to everything all at once. College, boom, 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 boom. So it's a lot.
And then like you said, not just a particular topic, but like you'll see a number of things that your parents probably didn't want you to see at a certain age, which I think is appropriate. I think some things you should not see.
It's a part of growth.
Yeah, but I think it's also really big to educate on certain matters, age appropriate matters.
Yeah,
age appropriate.
And I mean, kids now are learning things at 5 that I didn't know until I was like 15. So
yeah,
I mean, it's all just generational gaps, but
right. But I always say too that these kids, like the kids now, they're electronic kids, but so some parents now are like, oh, my kid won't be a tablet kid, but like they're gonna be left behind because this generation is so electronic. Right. And like, so Peyton knows how to do everything. Like, she be showing me stuff like, don't cook that. I'm like, oh, okay, why we don't cook that?
Right. And I mean, even with this subject, it's just, I can't tell anyone how to parent.
Right.
But it's like, I always say, just talk to your kids when you feel comfortable. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily wait until they're like 18, but I mean, most parents know.
Yeah,
like,
you know your kids.
If you know your kids, and I mean, if you don't talk to them, they're gonna see it on TV. They'll see it on the internet. They'll see it on Twitter. I mean, there's kids now are exposed to so much than when I was a kid. So
what's some advice that you would give to somebody? I'm backtracking now. To who's thinking about coming out, they're probably not too sure. Because it's not just that one conversation; it's a whole journey to take in accepting really yourself.
And for me, it was. I'll just be real. Mm-hmm. For me, I was outed. Mm-hmm. I wasn't given the grace to come to my parent and say, "Mom, I want to sit and have a talk with you." I was outed.
Oh my goodness!
So
what did they do? Just call your mom and just like
So it was
not to get too detailed. But
I won't get too. I won't dive too deep, but basically, a lady had basically told my mom all of my business, and so I remember she had freaked out, and it was very negative. That's why I always say it's not always honky dory, because my mom reacted very negatively. Mm-hmm. She was very upset. I think she was more hurt that I didn't talk to her about it when I was curious about things. So what I would tell younger people, and even like the younger kids now, because I mean, even when we at St. Hope, we have like younger guys or girls that come in and like, hey, and they'll ask like, you're so cool, and you know, I guess when we talk, and they're like, well, I'm curious about telling my parent. And I always tell them like, just you have to be ready for the reaction. And you can't be upset at the reaction. Mm-hmm. If you're ready to live in your truth, but just understand that not everybody's going to be accepting of what you say. Right. It's okay. It's not a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Like right now, I'm at the place in my age, I'm only 35, but I just tell it like it is. And I mean, if you don't like it, you don't like it. If you do, you do. But everyone's not receptive of that. And so for our younger generation that's coming up and they're curious about coming out, just understand, if you want to live in your truth, I say go for it. Mm-hmm. I want you to live in your truth. Be yourself, but understand everybody's not going to be on that wave with you. But it's okay. Yeah. You just have to make sure you have a good support system. So if something like, I won't say if something bad happens, but if the reaction isn't taken that you were hoping for, you at least have a solid support system. So at that time, I still had friends that were like, and I'll never forget one of my best friends from high school. It was so funny. He was a Marine, and he had came home from Iraq. And I'll never forget the story. It was so funny. We were actually going to eat wings at a sports bar. And I was like, this has been my best friend through high school. And I really don't have no one to turn, because my mom's already mad at me. Right. I'm kind of like, ugh. But I was like, I want to get this out because it's weighed on my chest for so long. And so we were driving one day. I remember we had a couple of drinks, and I was like, bro, I want to tell you something. He's like, what, you're gay? And I was like, wait, what? Right. And it had shook me, because I was like, wait. He's like, dude, I always knew. And I was like, oh. He's like, it's cool. He's like, I'm not, but I still support you. That weight was taken off of my shoulders, but just having that positive embrace of someone that you're close to, it felt so good.
Yeah, I think it's important to have at least one good solid person in your corner. And I'm even learning now, just going through life experiences and journeys, like you don't necessarily always have to agree, but you can understand people without necessarily agreeing. Does that make sense?
It does. And
like
you don't have to necessarily agree, but you can understand and be respectful.
Yeah. So like it's just like I was having a conversation the other day and it was just like, do you understand? Yes. Do you agree? Not 100%. And then they're like, why you don't agree? You know, and it's just kind of like important to know that people can have the same understanding, but it doesn't necessarily, you know, like just to be mindful, but respectful. Like, yeah, I agree. I respect what you're saying. But I don't think I was wrong. You know, like whatever the case was.
At that point, it's like, baby, let's just agree to disagree.
Right. And then just keep it moving. And as long as you have some solid people, you don't want people in your corner that make you feed into your delusions. I'm not saying that, but you do
try
have
to put you down. Like, oh my God, why would you come out of like?
Yeah,
you don't need that type of energy in your life.
Yeah, you do need people who understand and can be respectful to whatever you're going through in life, not just necessarily coming out, because I think it goes beyond just that. Like, because that's probably, you know, a difficult conversation. One of the most difficult conversations.
It really is. It's like, how can I compare it? That's like a daughter going to their mama saying, or mother or a daughter and son going to their parents saying, I'm pregnant. Like at
15.
16. It's like, oh my God, what? So yeah, it's one of those really heavy conversations. And I know I use myself as an example. It took me, I'm just being transparent. It took me and my mom a really long time to get into a good place of understanding and respect, because at one point we didn't talk for years, and it was tough.
Right.
I'm not gonna, because you know your mom is supposed to be like your anchor. She's like, so when she found out, like I said, it was a negative reaction, and after years we finally talked. And it goes back to, let's agree to disagree. So even though, I mean, she's more, how do I say it the right way? She's okay with it, but she's not okay with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Like she understands it.
She understands,
but she doesn't
agree.
Yeah.
But she's not rude or disrespectful to me. So it's like,
does she, I hate to be getting in your business, but does she push like, I got a girl at church for you?
Oh my God. Oh my God. And I'll
come closer to your mic. Don't run from your mic.
It's like,
no, I just know, because
I always want grandbabies. I'm like, you know, it can still happen.
Right.
So
I think that's like the narrative on TV too. You'll see like the mom is still like, I met a nice young lady, or I met a nice gentleman, and it's just like like you said, like you can be okay, but like I feel like that's when the respect comes in. Like, don't put, even, I'm not even just saying with this situation, like even with women who already have children and like they decide not to have any more children, or women who just decide not to have children, it's always somebody like trying to push an agenda.
I met this nice man. I think y'all would have prettiest man of my grandbaby.
Oh, my baby would be so beautiful if you just lay with it. You're just like, I don't even want to do that. Like, leave me alone.
That actually could lead into something really good. There's a horrible stigma that's placed on people that do come out also. So like like I said, I like to use myself as an example, just to be transparent so people can get more of a personal look into my life a little bit. My mom, when she found out about me, she assumed because I was homosexual, it was like I'm gonna be literally like, this is what she thought. Like I was gonna be walking around with like a tutu, and I'd be like, there's some gay men that are feminine. There's some gay men that are mad. There's some people that are in between that are a little bit of both, and that's fine. But my mom, for me, she thought it was more of the feminine side. So when she thinks of homosexual, she thinks of feminine. She thinks a man being with feminine features, with like nails and makeup, trying to wear wigs, and that's one thing I want to dispel. Like, just because someone is same-sex loving doesn't mean they're in a box to where this is what they like. Like for me.
You could do both.
I could do both. Like, I love football. Like, I love to play PlayStation. But at the same time, as you can see, I like to get my, like, I for some reason I have like this weird obsession with getting my nails like with the little tribal things on my fingernails. But it's not a bad thing. It's just
a balance.
It's just a balance. So that's one thing I really want people to just be cognizant of is just because someone likes a certain song don't put them in a box, because that's also gonna make them feel like I really don't want to disclose anymore. I don't want to open up to you, and it just shuts them down.
So I have another question. Just now that we're getting going, I want to know, just because you.
Just a heads up, 34 minutes.
Okay.
All right.
So I have a question. So I know you mentioned, it's very important to live in your truth, which I totally 100% agree with. But even after the conversation, like, was it like just, I know you mentioned it was very difficult to have that conversation with your mother and your friends and getting all that. But like, once the conversation was over, were you able to like fully live, or you still had to kind of like, tread lightly, I guess?
Back then, it was more of a, see, nowadays, kids can do whatever they want, pretty much, because it's just boom in your face. Still 90s, early 2000s, it was there, but it was more focused into certain, it was more shunned and into certain groups. So even though, like, my friends knew that I was a homosexual man, I would still engage and do only heterosexual norms, if that makes sense.
Right. So when did you decide, like,
so
this is kind of pretending in this area? I guess.
it was basically pretending. Like, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it,
right.
But like, once I met like Bunny and Adonis, and they were like, it's okay to just be yourself, right. So that's when I was like, I want to explore the other side. I want to go and do pride festivals. I want to go and do protests. I want to go to like the clubs, the bars. I want to be able to mingle and interact with other people, like-minded people like myself. I want to be friends with my transgender sisters, and like, let's talk about like hair and nails and stuff. Like, it's okay. Right. So
you mentioned heterosexual norms. Can you kind of explain, I guess, what that looks like?
For me, that's like only going to like a straight club, or I'm just being realistic. Like, if you want to go to the strip club, or if you only want to go like to watch the games and stuff like that, and you're with your boys and y'all don't talk about that, or y'all, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of norm. So even though I like to do that stuff, like, I love, like, everybody who knows me knows I love like going to football games. I love football.
We know.
But at the same time, it's like, now I can be comfortable with telling you guys, like, this is who I am. I still like this.
Right.
I'm still the same person. I haven't changed. I still like everything that I like to do, but I just want you guys to be aware that this is my life. This is also what I like to do. I mean, you can be with it, you can be against it, but I won't come off disrespectful to you. Like, and I think like respect is a two-way street. So some guy, like, let's just say for a guy point of view, I'm a homosexual man. I'm talking to a heterosexual man. I tell them about myself. They may think I'm just going to end up trying to hit on them.
Oh, yeah.
That's something I would like to just, like, that's...
Like, honey, you're not even my type.
Like, yeah, you're not even my type. So just because I come out to you doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to want to hit on you.
Right.
I'm trying to flirt with you or do something, like, no.
And I think that goes for women too.
It does.
Just because I tell you, like, a woman doesn't necessarily, you don't have to start clutching your pearls and packing up. Like,
oh my gosh, she's going to try to bring me home. Like, no, it doesn't work like that.
I'm just letting you know, so and that's it.
So, because you may say something offensive, and you're not aware of my life and my truth, and so I don't want you to offend me. But so that's why I want you to know, just so you could be aware, because that also, just you guys walking in a park, they could say something offensive, like, hey,
right,
what's up with that?
So you had to set, sounds to me like boundaries.
Yes.
So especially, it sounded like starting with your mom, and then transitioning over to finally getting back into communication and still being like, you can be okay, not okay, and just setting boundaries. So do you have like times where you just have to like disconnect?
All the time.
Yeah, I could imagine.
With my mom, like, there's times like we can talk, and I know she doesn't understand everything, and she'll say something, and I just be like, "Girl,
I gotta call you back."
It's one of those. Okay, mom, I love you. Call you back. Bye. Click.
And especially with our parents' generation, like, I think like, my mom was exposed to a lot of things, so she like knows. But like, as she's getting older, she's getting more judgy. Does that make sense? I don't know why. Like, she's just kind of like,
especially our older generations and like our parents and grandparents generations, they don't understand, and they like, even like our grandparents generations, they don't look at they don't care about social media.
Facebook. They love Facebook though.
They like Facebook apparently. Like that's becoming a thing, but they're not still not exposing themselves to becoming more open minded.
No, because I have to remind my mom sometimes, like, you were a fun girl in the 70s. Don't play.
Mama, you was that Freaknik.
You probably was that Freaknik documentary. Like, don't. So I just think it's interesting just how the more older we get, we kind of get more set in our ways and less willing to educate ourselves and understand things.
Right.
So this is just kind of like, you can't teach me nothing. So I think it's always important to stay open minded and set your boundaries. Like, I totally agree.
It's all about
Respect is a two-way street.
It really comes down to respect, boundaries, and communication. So even for like my younger people out there listening and watching at home or on or streaming services, like I said, if you want to come out, you can. Just understand people won't accept. Some people may not accept it or be receptive to it, and that's okay. But at least you're living your truth. Just make sure you, like I said, make sure you have solid foundation or a solid support group and loving people that genuinely love and care for you for who you are.
Right. So have a plan.
What?
Kind of have like a plan when you're
definitely have a plan.
Yeah.
So, and at St. Hope, sometimes there's people that don't have plans and they're kind of like in limbo to what they need to, what's next, what's their next step. So,
right. And I think it's also important, like, if you just don't feel comfortable, like, getting around those groups that do make you feel comfortable, at least having a safe space to be yourself. And I know some people who are like, okay, I know, but they're like, no, you're like, I know. So I think it's like important not to force people into that though. Like you have to be ready at your own time. So I think, like you were mentioning, like, have a plan and like also know that everybody's not going to be like team rainbow.
And that's fine.
Yeah.
I would say just read the room.
Oh, please read the room.
Just read the room before you say things, and for the person listening, also read the room so you know how to. It's all about communication. We're gonna go back to that.
Right. So I want to kind of wrap us up here.
Okay.
And I just want to speak. Maybe we can speak for ourselves on why pride is important.
Pride is important to me just because I know where I came from, and I am just happy with who I am. It took a really long time for me to get this comfortable with myself because I did face a lot of insecurities for myself, especially when it came to this subject. So pride for me is just, like I've been saying, live in your truth and being happy with who you are. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to be go rainbows, but you're comfortable with you and you love yourself, and that's what matters to me. Is I love myself, I'm happy with myself, and I'm happy with where I'm going in life. And that's pride, and why pride is important to me.
So I would say pride is important to me because it allows you to embrace the unknown. And it also allows you the unknown with others, but then yourself and things of that, and just really lean into like what we're all here for is to like love each other. I mean, like you mentioned, we already have enough insecurities within ourselves and hate and going on internal battles that I think is important to be more kind to each other and, you know, loving to one another. And I think pride is just a great representation of that reminder. Like, you don't have to agree, but you can be respectful, like, you know, and just love on your neighbor. Like, that's it.
Let's just spread love, not hate.
Yeah. And I just think it's a great message. Like, to love yourself, to love others for themselves, like, and if you don't, just leave your opinion to yourself. I really want to say that. Like, even not just with pride, but I feel like social media now, platforms, like, everybody feels like they have to let their opinion be known.
And sometimes an opinion is not needed.
Yeah.
Again, read the room.
Read the room, please. So I think it's just great. Pride just represents that to me. Just loving yourself, like you said, loving others, you know, just being respectful.
Yeah. Let me put a little plug in there.
Go ahead. Plug it up.
Our patients, if you're listening, and if you're questioning or you're not sure, we actually do, and I always like to plug them in. Shout out to Mallory and Charlotta. We do have counselors. And Josephine. We have counselors and case managers that are able to talk to you, or even if you want to talk to your doctor. But I always want to I want to tie it in with like mental health, just because it's an outlet that you can talk to. So even if you don't feel comfortable talking to your friends or your family, you can have a counselor talk to you and just kind of guide you. And so I just wanted to put a little shameless mental health.
Guide you through that journey. No, but from the start
helps.
of it, like you have to have a good support system, and it may not be able to be your family or friends, but that's why it's important to find a good therapist to talk to, and
that you may have feelings and you don't know how to express them. So I mean, yeah,
I agree.
So shout out to our counseling and case management team. I just wanted to do a little shameless plug.
Okay, so anything else that you want to say before we wrap this up? I think this has been really educational, and I'm really enjoying it.
No problem.
So,
no, I don't have nothing at the moment.
And I want to really just say that I appreciate you for getting personal and transparent on here, because I learned some things about you I did not know.
Oh, yeah. So, y'all ask me a question.
Sean gonna answer it.
I'll answer it. Especially people that Sugar Land, they understand. Like, you ask me something, you kind of get it.
Yeah,
get what you get.
You're going to get what you get. And don't throw no fit.
Don't throw a fit.
That's what you asked for. Okay.
But,
so thank you guys for listening in. We would love to hear from you. So like, comment below. And I also want to plug in that we actually have Pride shirts that we will be giving out throughout our clinics. And we just need you to like and comment some of these episodes. And
so
you can enter a raffle to win a lovely shirt. They're really nice. They're really cute. Jeremy did an amazing job. So shout out to Jeremy. That's my shameless plug.
That's your plug. Okay, so yeah, make sure y'all check in on our social media outlets. Make sure you check in with our front desk staff and ask how you can enter into the raffle for a Pride shirt. If you are curious about going to St. Hope for any kind of services, you can also visit our website at offeringhope.org, or you can call us at 713-778-1300. And just remember, here at St. Hope Healthcare, you're more than just a number.